so much all for being here tonight. We really appreciate you coming out. We're here with the BreakBeat Poets. We do have the book that you can buy or also check out when you have a chance. This event was made possible by our Cultural Events Committee, our Diversity Committee, and the WICKED Committee of Women Integrating Curriculum and Creating Diversity. So we all came together to bring our wonderful guests here.
And that's the acronym for real?
That is for real, yes. That's how important WICKED here is.
Yeah,
yes. So we're going to have a little bit of an introduction from Dr. Jeff Sychterz, who will be talking a little bit about poetry and hip hop. Are you going to read bios as well?
I can do the bios if you'd like.
Okay, we can do bios probably. Yeah, that'd be great. And then we'll have some poetry, some hip hop poetry, and some discussion about hip hop and poetry, and then we'll have some more poetry. We'll have a lot of poetry. It'll be great. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. We had a dance routine, but because I got here late, we didn't have time to rehearse.
Okay.
My apologies for that. You know, come to Augusta tomorrow.
Augusta
Might
tomorrow,
get to see
guys.
it.
Excellent.
All right. Okay. So Jeff Sychterz, and I guess I'll start. I've been asked to introduce the BreakBeat Poets in this exciting new anthology by saying a few words about hip hop poetry. There's something very ironic about an academic sitting here to introduce, justify, or explain hip hop. In fact, in his cycle, Renegades of Funk, John Murillo, one of the poets in the anthology, represents the rule-bound authoritarian system that oppresses the hip-hop generation as a middle school teacher. She uses education, specifically Newton's law of gravity, as a counterweight to freedom and a tool of oppression. And the young poet frames his rebellion and makes his escape through b-boy dance moves. Quote, busting headspins on her desk, a moonwalk out the door, referred to Mr. Brown's detention, all of them trying to keep us down. The tension is clear. Education rules on one side, hip-hop and freedom on the other. But Murillo does something sly here, something truly subversive. The first line of the next poem riffs on the line we just heard. It begins, attention, rhythms why they keep us. And so it goes through 7 14-line poems, the first line echoing the last line of the previous poem. In other words, his celebration of hip-hop renegades is a crown of sonnets. Murillo uses one of the oldest and whitest of European poetic forms to celebrate hip-hop renegades who rise above the system. Hip-hop has been a major force in America now for more than 30 years. It has so completely transformed the radio landscape that we no longer hear people say that it is not really music. Not anybody matters. But the world of poetry is different. In many corners, we hear the refrain, hip-hop is not serious poetry. The modernist and postmodernist techniques of dry irony, dry erudition, and a free verse that eschews any sort of rhyming have conquered classrooms and poetry journals throughout America. For most young Americans, poetry is either something mind-achingly dull or so old they can't relate to it. Poetry is something they do in school, hip-hop is something they do in life. But Murillo's Renegades of Funk shows us that those definitions set up a false dichotomy. When he replays and riffs on the line you just heard, is he following some medieval Italian playbook? Or is he playing poet as DJ, poetic line as breakbeat? The poem cycle shows us that it is both. The definition is irrelevant. Hip-hop is poetry. As Q-Tip boasted in 1990, this ain't rock and roll because the rap is in control. In other words, hip-hop is play of language, serious play, a play with an edge. But it is more than that. For Kevin Coval, hip-hop is two kids finding each other on the bus, forging a friendship through love of rhyme, rhythm, and flow. For Jose Olivarez, hip-hop is working through grief on a basketball court. And for Safia Elhillo, hip-hop is elegy and exploration of identity. So hip-hop is not just a form. It, like other poetry, is memory, communication, community, and celebration. But if hip-hop is poetry, shouldn't we drop the term breakbeat and just say poetry? Not on your life. Hip-hop began as a revolt against appropriation and oppression, what Langston Hughes termed, quote, the mold of American standardization. But it has grown into something so much more. Hip-hop is now a global language of energy, protest, and change. Wherever there is poverty, there is hip-hop. Wherever there is injustice, there is hip-hop. Wherever there is racism, intolerance, desires, hopes, dreams, fears, loves, joys, there is hip hop. As Lupe Fiasco puts it, hip hop saved my life. Many of the breakbeat poets would agree. Hip hop has saved them, and it can save us too. I would like to suggest that hip hop can save poetry as well, but the poets you will hear this evening demonstrate that hip hop already has. Some of you may be familiar with Emily Dickinson's famous definition of poetry, perhaps the only true definition of poetry. Quote, "If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry." Unquote. So hold on to your heads. You're about to hear some poetry, breakbeat poetry. Who's going to get started?
I'm going to go first, and we're going to go around. But yeah, that seems very long.
Okay, so Kevin Coval is a poet?
Yeah, good. All right, good. Yeah, you can everybody.
Okay. You want to go? You want to?
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
Yeah, I've done stuff.
You've done a lot of stuff. All right, he's done a lot of stuff, and he's called the voice of the new Chicago. All
He's
right?
gonna have a sandwich named after him soon.
Yep.
Nice, nice.
And a drink. More importantly, a drink.
It's a pairing.
He also happens to be one of the editors of the Breakbeat Poets. So I guess we'll introduce everybody. Safia Elhillo. Elhillo, yes. A Sudanese by the way of Washington, D.C., a Cave Canem Fellow and poetry editor at Kinfolk's Quarterly. She received an MFA in poetry from the New School. Safia is co-winner of the 2015 Brunel University African Poetry Prize. Her work appears in several publications, in the anthologies The Breakbeat Poets, and Again I Wait for This to Pull Apart. She has shared her work at venues such as the New Amsterdam Theater on Broadway, the Kennedy Center, the South African State Theater, and TEDx New York. And then Jose Olivarez is the co-author of the book of poems Home Court. He is a graduate of Harvard University, the program director at Urban Word NYC, and an editor at Painted Bride Quarterly. A winner of the 2015 Bronx recognizes its own award, great name, from the Bronx Council on the Arts. His work has been published or is forthcoming in the Breakbeat Poets, the Acentos Review, Spectre Magazine, Union Station Magazine, and Luna Luna Magazine, among other places. His work has also been featured on Yahoo's Ball Don't Lie basketball blog, Chicago Public Radio, and on Mass Poetry's Poetry on the T program. He is from Calumet City, Illinois, and he lives in the Bronx.
Thank you so much. Cool. All right. Well,
I think Jeff and I will go back up here
Okay.
because we want to feature you guys,
okay.
our guests.
You guys aren't going to rap later, though?
Maybe,
Okay.
maybe. Ask me later.
We'll miss you. Until
Learning is such sweet stuff.
Thank you guys for having us. Thanks for being here. We are going to read some poems, and then we're going to have a conversation, and then read a few more poems. But in the conversation or after the poems, at some point, we would also love to build with y'all. And so, as questions emerge and develop, or feedback, or points of contention, pop in your head, please, remember them or jot them down, or just interrupt us and be like, hey, actually, because we would very much we would like to have it be a conversation. We're just going to read a few pieces and then be in conversation. I'm going to start. I'm going to read some new poems and exclusive. And the book I'm writing now is about Chicago in the 90s. And how it gentrified, and I'm trying to figure out kind of the roots of how we got to this moment in Chicago, because the city that I was born in looks very different from the city that I live in now. And there's reasons for that, but I'm trying to do like some historic excavation, as well as just, personal narration of my time in a particular neighborhood in Chicago known as Wicker Park. And so this is one of those stories. It's called The Girl from the Neighborhood. Milwaukee Avenue was raw and changing. The only street in the city I had stories on, and I guess I thought a date was an event you told and listened to stories. You could get crack and ass and How to Eat to Live by Elijah Muhammad on Milwaukee Avenue. I fought there and thought there and knew Rudy and Oba. Logan Square was still Mexican then, and Puerto Ricans overflowed from the swell in Humboldt Park. I got a flat coming to pick you up somewhere along the boulevard. When I did pull up in front of your house on Central Park, south of Fullerton. The entire family was on the porch, a crew of little cousins, nieces, nephews, half the island. When I said I'll pick you up at 7, you thought I meant 8. I was on white boy time. I had to wait out there for a half hour while you got ready. You're not really little cousin Carlos, a baby giant full of slick talk and jibarito, started to roast me on the wooden stairs I came to know your uncle built. Carlos made all the little ones laugh at my expense outside as the sun sunk west and all the apartments spread shadows on the ground, slow like a sheet, in the lovely moment where it's suspended for a second above the earth, the bed above your body before finally settling. He said, "You look like that dude from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids." Fuck you, Jose. And the little ones howled and smiled, and Carlos was victorious and not yet 11. Later, you told me his dad was killed a year ago, a few blocks from where we stood. We got 22s of honey brown and walked to the park. You said you wanted to hear something I wrote. I whispered a little rap in your ear beneath a big ass oak. We made it on Milwaukee, out the park, and walked south, stopped in front of Earwax, the coffee shop cafe I knew all the bus boys could G weed and free food at. You looked inside, said you weren't hungry, said you didn't want to eat white people food, and got mad at the idea of a veggie burger. We stood there in front of the cafe, talking shit a bit and then nothing. All the new faces, all the white faces, my own reflected in the glass, your eyes, wells like the school, close, closed, the lake, great, ocean, salty, bacalao, African bloodline, ocean, crossing. You said you couldn't go there. This space wasn't for you. Wondered what we were doing here. And of course, you were right, but I had hoped this was something different, or I was, or this was, the city big enough to love you in. Word.
Can you go back to the part where Carlos?
No. You want me to read that? Run it back. Run it back. Run it back. Hey, Jose, can't wait to hang out with you afterwards, bro. Shit out you. Okay. I'm gonna read one more from the same kind of section, or not even the same section, but I mentioned in the poem Oba, who is a street poet in Chicago who just passed, he just died this past week. And this is an older cat who was in this neighborhood, Wicker Park, where my family moved to America and lived in Wicker Park, or Ukrainian Village, since 1906. And so my whole life kind of revolved around this neighborhood. And Oba was one of the first people I met in the neighborhood when I moved back in 96. And he he would stand on Milwaukee Ave and sell his poems and talk to everybody. And, he just passed. So I've not read this out loud. Oba, the poet laureate of Milwaukee Avenue, all bone with jaundiced eyes. He carried photocopies of poems the Asian copy center owner let him make for the free. He kept originals there too, in a folder in a cabinet labeled poetry. Oba would add to the stack damn near daily, fire off 100 copies and hit the Ave, selling and reciting the same poem all day long. They usually go for $1, though some he'd give away. They'd usually be about Chicago and the new day coming or needed, or the new folk coming on the Ave here, and how the hood should be for all people, and how the city should be too, a new age type of spiritualism that from his mouth, guided by cat green and yellowed eyes of Ra, seemed believable, necessary. And that's all I expect from art, something to believe in, to have a function and to serve it. The antithesis is so much of the bullshit hanging in the galleries popping up along the Ave. Paintings to populate a living room in a condo in an old factory Oba couldn't afford or get a job at. Couldn't be more sincere. He could have been 50 or 1,000. One night he put a band together at Yo Mama's Cafe. He played the sax and read poems. Baristas and bartenders and beer backs came, some musicians too, folks I'd heard on the street, on a corner, or late night at Estelle's, a man the people knew. I'd always pay my $1 for a poem and gather the gems he'd kick around after the recitation. It was a street tax, a luxury tax, tuition to study at the feet of the poet laureate of Milwaukee Avenue. Word. I got one more, thanks. Cool, those poems were sweet. They were very nice poems. This poem is not so nice. Part of, I think, implicit and at the foundation of hip hop culture is also the notion of the battle. You know, that we just got off the summer of Drake and Meek Mill, and you know, there's a very long history. And remember, yeah, rest in peace. You know, it goes back to you know, the foundation of the culture. I mean, in a lot of ways, you know, hip hop derives its notion of the battle from the sound clash in the West Indies when Jamaican DJs would see whose sound system was the best, and in the same dance hall they would stack 2 sets of sound systems across from each other, and basically whoever had the most dancers by the end of the night was victorious. And sometimes there'd be fights, and sometimes there'd be bloodshed, but mostly it was just a good time. And hip hop is similar in that way, and in that regard as well. I mean, I think hip hop is also owed a Nobel Peace Prize. It's taken implements of destruction from the hands of generations and put in the tools of creation. This is about a lot of different people, but basically I was just on one that day, you know what I'm saying? So it's like basically like a, you know, all the battle rap is like, I'm dope, and you, the archetypical whack MC, are not, you know what I mean? So this begins with a quote from Kanye on Mercy. He says, most rappers' taste level ain't at my waist level. Can't trust. Yeah.
That's the quote you chose?
Yeah, bro. That's like, I'm getting that tatted around my waist. Look, the point is that I also sample or steal the title of Public Enemy's song, Can't Trust It, for this poem. This is called Can't Trust It. It goes like this. It's a devolution. It begins with an agreement to wear an ugly ass sweater ironically, or to please your mother who got you looking like Fat Christmas, or somebody's uncle fresh out the retirement home hollering at geriatric ass. It's a cosign of a white singer who sound like they did nothing during timeouts in their suburban McMansion other than listen to their nannies Diana Ross Delphonics records and come out the other end of the silver spoon crooning rap Frank Sinatra. And you love that. It's saying not all cops are bad, my uncle's one. Like your individual shelter is an excuse not to indict a whole history, an entire system with your simpleton ass. Like you haven't turned on the TV all summer or been outside the strip mall you call culture. Wow. You haven't had a new idea ever and want to translate Homer into Ebonics and make it relevant for the hip hop generation and get MacArthur grants for that and all the white dollars and blood money and live in a section of Brooklyn or Humboldt Park you wouldn't have gone 10 years ago. You take all the dinner invitations and wear your goofy ass sweater and swear you never swear, but drop a B in your diction for street cred with your fictional roots. Alex Haley, you are not. William O'Neill, you are. You are no Max Roach, sir. You are the type to say yes to the CIA when they knock on your door and get you for 10 over the speed limit. You the type to be in cahoots with the feds and say yes to damn near anything anyone suggests because you're taste suspect. And I suspect you always going to be on that sheep shit like the sweater you currently wearing a wire underneath because the slope slippery.
Hey. That's fired.
That was about me. Just another stomp on his grave.
What's up, everyone? How are you doing?
Not so well. Like we were good.
Are you guys okay? We can talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's a safe space. That's a nice sweater, man. No, I like that sweater. You know what I'm saying? Forest green is definitely like the move. I like that sweater.
All right, so I'm gonna start by reading a love poem, because it feels like we need a love poem after that. Nah, just because this is a poem I want to read. This is a love poem I wrote for my dad. I think I'm working on a new book, and I think it's gonna be mostly love poems and odes. Because I think, one, that's what I'm writing, and then two, like, that's also what moves me the most right now. So this is called Bulls versus Suns, 1993. Thing that you should know about me, I really like basketball. Maybe too much, some would say. All right, Bulls versus Suns, 1993. Sitting on your lap, watching your eyes follow the bouncing basketball, and my heart is 100 basketballs, dribbling mad love for your arms, hugging me, throwing me into the air and catching me again after Marv Albert exclaims, "Here's Paxson for 3, yes." And love is your fist closed and not fighting for once. Your fist fireworks above your head. The way you say Paxson with a mouthful of joy. And my heart is shooting 1,000 jump shots. Heart running layup drills. Looking for you in the bleachers. Heart loving what you love. Damn, my heart running suicides to be in your heart's Hall of Fame. All right, so the next two that I'm going to read are about where I'm from. The first one is a newer poem. It's called Poem for Cal City Confession after Joshua Bennett. Joshua Bennett is another breakbeat poet. Also very exciting, his book just won the National Poetry Series. So it's coming out on Penguin Books. We're really excited about that. Yep, 2016, already looking very lit.
You want that book if you love yourself.
If you love yourself, love yourself, you know what I mean? So I'm just gonna read this poem. Poem for Cal City. You were far south, but not south side. What was I ashamed about? My mom and dad busting their ass to own a house, and I was mad I lived in a suburb. It's true, our school got locked down. The dogs sniffed through the halls. I said, "What up, folk?" I thought it meant fam. Maybe it does. It's true. John got shot. I didn't make it all up. I'm trying to remember how it started. Who started calling you unsafe? Calling you a thug. My mom in her garden, a criminal. Me in my books, gangster. John getting shot in all my conversations. We were poor. Not everything was a lie. Facts were omitted. My brothers and I walking safely to school. The cops searching our lockers found mostly Pokemon cards and weed. You weren't exactly hard. We were safe and loved inexactly. John did get shot. It's true. He went to college. That's not a lie. He survived. So how come when I talk about home, it's smoke rising from the fire of a gun, not the smoke of fireworks, barbecues to toast the new graduate. Thank you. One of the reasons that I'm writing a lot of love poems is because I've been thinking a lot about joy, and I feel pretty joyful. But when I sit down to write, a lot of times, and maybe it's just because I have a lot of feelings. You know what I'm saying?
Shout out to Adele.
Shout out to Adele. Maybe no shout out to Adele. Maybe I don't want to be thanking Adele right now. I don't. Yeah, it might be the battle of Adele.
We're not all in a battle. Let's be clear.
That's fair. Just a lot of crime. But yeah, so I'm like a pretty joyful person. But when I write, I tend to write a lot of like more somber things, right? And so I want to think about why that is, and like how, in what ways do like the narratives that I'm told end up coming through me without sort of my intention, right? And so that poem, I was trying to like think about like, why are these things that I say, even though there's like more to the story? How can I tell a more full picture? How do I like not just talk about the things that make me sad or angry, but how do I also talk about the things that make me happy? And I think that one of the things that I'm finding is I have a lot less language for joy.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I want to be intentional about writing love poems because they make me find language for joy. So with that in mind, this next poem is about something sad.
On that note, this one has nothing to do with what I
Yeah, on
said.
that note, you know what I mean?
It's the opposite of what I just told you about.
That's what you call juxtaposition. That's a poetic technique. You know what I'm saying? You're watching, you know, your lecture, you know what I mean?
For those of you keeping track at home.
Yeah, you're on the live stream.
Juxtapose.
Juxtaposition. I don't know why people bring me out to events.
Starting to think the same. No, I'm kidding.
But thank you for listening, for being here with us. This is called Home Court. This is also from the BreakBeat Poets book. When I was in second grade, Oscar and Caesar's dad died. When they finally came outside, their faces ashen with sorrow, we turned to the basketball court. We played with shadows of death threatening to touch. We were defiant. We were still alive. We sweat the fever of hurt from our bodies, our small hands aching to be held. We played all day, and it was more prayer than basketball. The jumper's follow-through was a small, noiseless plea. We held the ball like rosary beads and prayed with our hands. We put up 1,000 shots of penance, all of us trying to gather all of the magic left in our wrists. Lord, we prayed all day, and it was more teeth than basketball. We stomped around the concrete trying to destroy it. Every dribble was violent, a curse. We were daring whatever God was watching to strike us down too. We were striking anything we could touch, our eyes dry and vengeful. We fought all day on the same basketball court that Oscar and Caesar's dad built. Oh grief, we went back to our houses when we realized we were playing on the dead man's court. That was nothing compared to our hearts when we looked at our hands and saw our whole bodies were made of grief. We walked away tough-fisted and prayer-hearted, our hands stained bright orange, the ball bleeding away into a patch of grass that couldn't hide the wound.
So now I don't want to read any poems after these two. Contract says I have to, so.
Contractually obligated.
But now I do feel like I'm Michelle Williams of the group. But it's okay. No, I'll be the Latoya Latavia hybrid. That I feel at peace with that in my heart. So I write a lot of poems about where I'm from, or a lack thereof.
So you're saying you're from Chicago?
Obviously, that's what this is all leading up to. I'm here to confess that I also am from Chicago.
We knew it all along.
And I feel like so Arabic is my first language, but I have been speaking and reading and writing in English for a long time. And I feel sometimes that it's at the expense of my Arabic. So a lot of my recent work, I've been trying to sort of harness that bilingualism so that I'm not like writing poems in English instead of Arabic. So this poem is called Vocabulary. And I'm going to try and teach you guys some Arabic with me. And also we're going to talk about Egyptian pop music because that's what I like to write about. Vocabulary. Fact. The Arabic word hawa means wind. The Arabic word hawa means love. Test. Multiple choice. Abd al-Halim said, "You left me holding wind in my hands." Or Abd al-Halim said, "You left me holding love in my hands." Abd al-Halim was left empty, or Abd al-Halim was left full. Feiruz said, "Oh wind, take me to my country." Or Feiruz said, "Oh love, take me to my country." Feiruz is looking for vehicle, or Feiruz is looking for fuel. Kulthum said, "Where the wind stops her ships, we stop ours." Or Kulthum said, "Where love stops her ships, we stop ours." Kulthum is stuck, or Kulthum is home. And this next poem, I keep changing the title, but today it's called An Inheritance. Did our mothers invent loneliness, or did it make them our mothers? Were we fathered by silence, or just looking to explain away this quiet? Is it wasteful or wistful to pray for our brothers in a language they never learned? Whose daughters are we if we grow old before our mothers, or for their sakes? They called our grandfathers the January children, lined up by the colonizer and assigned birth years by height. There is no answer because we come from men who do not know when they were born, who married women shown to them in photographs, whose children left the country and tried for romance and had daughters full of all the wrong language. And this next poem, so Jose brought up a point that I've been thinking a lot about how to talk and write about joy, but particularly how to write and talk about joy with integrity in the face of all the horrifying shit that's happening in the world these days and always. So some friends and I put on a show this past summer, and they decided that the theme would be Black joy. And I, had to write a poem about it because all the rest of my poems are tragic, and I didn't want to trick people into thinking they'd be coming for a Black joy show and, surprise. So I wrote this poem called Self-Portrait with Yellow Dress. I believe that sometimes we do not die. I will not believe that to be housed in a body that is black is to be dressed always in black for the funeral. We live forever. Sometimes our mouths open and a song falls out, thick with a saxophone syrup, and all our dead in the ground make this land ours, and all our missing fathers make us everything's child. Today I did not dress for a funeral. Today I wear the yellow dress and laugh with all my teeth. Today my lost ones are not lost to me. They live in the wind that gathers my skirt. Today this is my country. Today I say their names, and all the holes left behind, shaped like black girls and black boys, are lit up by hundreds of faraway stars. Today I woke up and was not dead. And tomorrow might be different, but tomorrow does not yet exist. So I hold my mother's hand and kiss the brown valley between each knuckle. My brother opens his mouth to laugh, and the light pours in through the gap in his teeth, and no one will ever again say that my eyes are too serious. I press my body to a man that I find beautiful, and sway to a song that knows us. I live forever with my feet in my grandmother's lap. I live forever by the water with the sun spilled over me. Remember me this way. And when they come for me, play the song I love into the space I leave behind.
Yeah, want to welcome you guys back. We'll have a bit of a chat, right? That makes sense?
I'm coming back. Okay.
Yeah.
If we missed you guys, don't ever leave us again.
But you held it down so well with us.
It's hard.
So what's up, gang?
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So I was wondering, Kevin, in one of your poems, you mentioned the battle, right, and that kind of that aspect of hip hop. But what we also see up here is a lot of camaraderie amongst all of you, right? That you're celebrating other authors' works coming out. You're teasing each other, but also celebrating each other. So can you guys maybe talk a little bit about kind of those aspects of hip hop and how they're juxtaposed, right? Because how they're juxtaposed, but how they maybe come together through the work or through the art or how, whatever that question means to you.
I love this question.
If that makes sense.
So one of the first hip hop I ever heard, actually, was the Wu-Tang Clan, because my uncle is a big fan. And I think what I loved then and what I love now is sort of the camaraderie about it. There's on 36 Chambers, there's that skit right before Method Man where they're basically making up really absurd threats to each other. So the last one being, I'll fucking sew your asshole shut and keep feeding you. So that ability to sort of tease each other and like mess around with each other with like that evident love is what I fuck with that so hard. And I think hip hop is a really amazing space for that, where a lot of the times you see collectives come together sort of against the odds, just for the fact of being like young and of color and alive, and having a platform to speak and to share, and to be able to do it with people that they love, I think is amazing.
You had that answer ready and waiting.
I love, all my answers are about Wu-Tang, and I find a way to make every question about Wu-Tang.
I'm glad you asked about my grandma. I feel that. I feel like that there's something about, you know, what Jose was talking about earlier about the necessity of joy, and that that play is also a way to have people stay alive. And if you think even about, you know, the reference to that meth skit, in some ways, like a lot of hip hop also stems from the dozens and signifying, and that, you know, Black vernacular diasporic practice is also very much about coded language that will be about one inside group that I'm communicating with, and then an outside group that might think it is communicating something else. So even, like, you know, they say in families, if you don't get made fun of, then that's how you know people don't fuck with you. And I think hip hop is very much, you know, practicing these inherited traditions of, you know, verbal play, you know, which is like, I'm gonna clown you, we're gonna clown each other, we're gonna like beat, but it's also, that's how families do, you know. So I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, and then I think, I mean, I love both those answers, and I think to think about how it extends into poetry for me is that it's like a very, just like a natural extension of the communities that exist within hip hop. You know what I mean? Like the book, the BreakBeat Poets, has 78 people in it, and we're like kind of like a crew. You know what I mean? We did this big show in New York in May to launch the book, one of a bunch of shows that were done to launch the book. And it felt like it kind of felt like we were the Wu-Tang Clan, you know what I mean? Like,
It exactly felt like we were the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I remember when I was like 16 years old, just starting to write poetry, one of the first things that happened was I became part of like a hip hop crew, you know what I mean? And I like couldn't rap, but they were like, oh, you write poetry? You gotta be a part of our crew, you know what I mean? And I was 16 and, you know, still fairly shy and like, didn't have many friends at high school, you know what I mean? AKA, I was a regular person in high school. And one of the first things that poetry and that the art sort of gave me was the beginnings of learning how to have friendship, and how to, like, I think for me also very importantly, like how to express love in healthy ways, you know what I mean? Which includes learning how to clown people.
Very much like a found family. You know, there was, you know, I'm older than these folks by a generation in hip hop age, I would say. And thank you. Reminder. It's not my point, guys. Is that, you know, there what, like, when hip hop felt like a secret outside of New York, when you know, when it was exported to other cities, you know, it felt like a mistake in some ways. Like when I got tapes, or when I saw Flashdance, or when I saw Style Wars for the first time and then wanted to break, I felt like, I'm like, there's clearly something wrong with the television now that's showing me this. But then if you finally found someone who rhymed, or, you know, was into graffiti or breakdancing in an era where hip hop was not yet popular culture, it was a way to forge a found family that you felt like you were at home in. And you could tell, I mean, you could tell walking the streets or riding the bus, like who was into hip hop by the way that they dressed or moved or like nodded to their headphones or whatever it was. And then that person would become your homie. And now I feel like it's similar in the poetic, where there are probably more people writing poems because of hip hop now than there ever have in the history of the world. And we find each other as a found family because of the form.
That might be a good transition to a question about poetry. Did you have?
I don't have one about poetry. Actually, something just hit me, and I feel silly if I haven't picked it up before. It's a small question, but 78. That seems like a really symbolic number for LP.
Right.
Is that purposeful or?
Yes. Thank you for noticing. No, I don't know how.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's because like, some people didn't get back to us,
Okay.
We could have had, I mean, I think we were going for 88. I think like in the numerology, like that would have been like the preferred number. But,
Break that down for us.
why 88? 88, well, that's two infinite eights, you feel me? Flip them over, it's infinity looking at each other. And then what happened was in 88, was also maybe arguably, Jose was born in
That's why.
88. His name is Jose. There's an O with Jose, meaning the infinite
I'll talk
circle.
about Saturday morning.
I'm gonna stop now. What was the question? Oh, yeah. 78. There's 78 poems in the book. That's just how it happened. Yeah.
So actually, my real question here, actually,
Like, we look somewhere far from that.
and this actually is not necessarily about poetry, but something I noticed during the performance here was that it's very different than maybe what some of the audience would expect from how one is expected to consume poetry. It reminds me of this moment when Denzel Washington did Fences a few years back, and it was this huge scandal in New York that the audience is talking back to the actors on stage. How dare they do that? And so I'm just interested in you talking about performance as politics or as culture and how it differs from the ways that we normally think about consuming poetry. What is it about poetry?
So a lot of my early introduction to poetry was through Poetry Slam, which is competitive spoken word poetry. And especially towards the end of my time competing, there was this narrative that came up a lot where, so I was on a slam team in college, and my last few years at nationals, the attitude was that whenever a team that was predominantly students of color was doing well, people would say it was because they were good performers. And whenever a team that was mostly white was doing well, people would say it was because they were good writers. And I think there's this assumption that if you know how to use your body, it's at the expense of your intellect. So I think a lot of times people will think that just because you can write a poem, well, you go to, so I just finished my MFA and I spent a lot of time going to really boring academic poetry readings where people will get up on a podium and put their heads down like this and rush through it like it hurt them to read the poem and sit down. So a lot of the times when you just read the poem like you meant what you said, people would assume that you were trying to make up for some lack in your writing ability by overperforming, but I think that one doesn't have to be at the expense of the other, and I think in its truest form, if you wrote it and you meant it, I think when you're reading it back out loud, it helps if it shows.
Yeah, I would add, so one of the things that I've gotten a chance to do in the last couple of years is read poems for a literary magazine. Actually, now that I'm saying this, I wonder if I'm gonna get in trouble. Whatever. So I read poems that people submit to this literary magazine. One of the things that I've noticed is that depending on who in the room reads the poem out loud, it changes whether a poem will get accepted into the magazine or not. In other words, if someone reads it in a very boring way, no matter how exciting the poem is, the life of the poem is completely sucked out of the poem. I've seen it happen to poems that I've loved, that I'm like, oh yes, I definitely want that in the magazine. And then I hear it out loud in someone else's voice. I'm like, yo, that shit is trash. Please, get it away from me. So I think, I just think that if you are doing a reading, it's different than just having the book in front of you, Otherwise, hand out copies of your poem and sit down. Do you know what I mean? Why would you speak them out loud? The other thing that I think about is that just personally as a performer, as someone who does this, I want to have fun, you know what I'm saying? And it's not fun for me if I'm sitting here and I'm here and hiding from the audience. It's much more fun if I get to crack jokes and talk shit and get behind the scenes, sort of whatever. If I get to dive deeper in certain ways into the poem. So the other thing is also just that that I want to have, that as much as it's like I want to connect with the audience, I also, for me, it's important that it's enjoyable and that I have a good experience. You know what I'm saying?
And I think we come from a culture that's participatory.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, we're seated in a circle and we're at the front of the room, but I think where we come from, it's also like any one of you could come up and read a poem. And we just did a poetry workshop prior to this, and many of you could now come up, read a poem if you didn't have books already. And I think that connection between the artist and the audience is something in the aesthetic, in the genre, that is imperative. That I don't think I don't want to speak for anybody. For me, I would say that I am absolutely writing for somebody other than myself. And if I wanted to only write for myself, and you hear writers say that a lot, I feel, that would mean I would just not speak to anybody. And I wish a lot of the writers who wrote for themselves only would not speak to anybody. But I think what I mean is like,
Like, maybe for today.
yeah, always today. What do you mean? What do you mean?
You're like kind of a hater.
Not kind of. You know, as we're getting to know each other. Yeah. I just feel like, you know, the performance is, you know, tied and rooted into a community, and I think, you know, now our generations of poets are very much taking notes from what it means to MC, which means to move the crowd. And if it doesn't work in the ear, if it doesn't work me to you, then it probably also is not working on the page too.
Interesting. Good stuff. I do have another question, but maybe we have other questions that you guys want to ask. Anybody want to ask some questions?
Yeah.
No pressure.
I won't yell at you. I'll see.
All right, I have a question for Kevin. When you're reading, or like before and after, do you always, I shouldn't like always, but do you do it on purpose, like talk and like you're rhyming, like not in your rhyming, but you use a different tone? I notice when you get done reading, you still talk in the same way. You take the same breaks sometimes.
In my like normal speech pattern,
Yeah.
the way that I read a poem.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone else notice? That he does that? Yeah. So I didn't know if it was on purpose or.
Right. I think that I try to get the poems to sound like I sound. And I think and sometimes I don't like if I am reading a poem and I feel like I'm not sounding like myself. I feel like that means I need to either like chill and go back to sounding like myself, or probably what it means is that I'm not writing the right poem and I need to revise and edit. You know, I feel like I'm in a school where, you know, Gwendolyn Brooks is the mentor of us all. And in that school, in that tradition, which I might call realist working class portraiture, Gwendolyn talked a lot about the necessity to tell the story that's in front of your nose. And I think part of what she also was trying to do was get people to populate the poem with language that they were immersed in and around in. And the language that's in your head and the language that's around your head should also then be the language that populates your poem. So, you know, so that the poem doesn't have to be, you know, all flowery and shit if you're not around flowers and shit, basically. And so for me, I don't know, that's the hope anyway for me, you know.
I have a question. I teach high school, and we just read the things they carried, and a big thing in this book is about emotional truth, like how writers convey emotional truth, and it's not the real truth. And so I'm wondering if you guys could speak about how, you know, because very much you're putting yourselves out there in your poetry, clearly, as we've seen, but how do you like get them to feel what you want them to feel when maybe if you just like, you know, my friend's dad died. They're not really feeling the sadness of like the hands bleeding orange kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about that a little.
Go ahead.
I don't know who first said this to me, but I feel like a thing that comes up in every poetry workshop I've ever been in is that you want to show instead of tell. You know, so if I were to write a poem and say, my friend's dad died, it was really sad, and that's it. I'm telling you how to feel, so chances are you're not gonna go on that journey with me, because I gave away the point of the journey. But if, you know, and I think that's what Jose does really beautifully in that poem, is he lets you experience it as the speaker is experiencing it, so you all get to that conclusion together. So I think there has to be something at stake. So if you build up to that moment of sadness, then you're invested enough in it that, you know, when the sad thing happens, you're sad too.
Yeah, also, yeah, in a lot of ways, I think I'm more interested in the emotional truth than the facts of something, because I don't know, the emotional truth just always, yeah, the facts of something are what they are, but what they mean to at any one given moment can change. You know what I mean? Like I read the poem that I wrote, and certainly I feel sadness, but I feel a lot of different things, and I can tell that story in any number of ways. So I think part of, for me, what crafting a poem is figuring out how to arrange the facts and how to like play with them, how to open them up. I think about the poem that Safia read last, where she talks about, you know, tomorrow is not here. It's not existing, right? And how because of that, there's a lot of possibilities that she plays with, how to pour light into that space. And so I think that I'm interested in using poetry, and the work that moves me is work that ultimately I don't necessarily care too much if the facts are all the way true or not, as much as like if it strikes me as true and authentic emotionally. You know what I'm saying?
And if you're a high school teacher, please use the film Louder Than a Bomb. Louder Than a Bomb. It's a documentary about the poetry festival we do in Chicago. And it's on Netflix. You can stream it. Yeah, it's on Netflix. You can stream it. Yeah.
A related question. Getting to like the emotional truth, have you ever had an experience where you've written something and it's very powerful and this is your emotional truth, but you're like, oh, I really hope my mom never hears this, or like someone who you feel like, not that you don't want to be honest with them, but sometimes you don't always have to tell the truth to everybody, you know?
Damn, that's deep.
So there's my memoir.
I can start because my answer is kind of easy. I'm lucky because my parents speak Spanish, and so they can't. They are not able to understand the things that I read. So I don't have to think about that question. I can write whatever I want. You know what I mean? Like my mom will never know.
Until the Spanish translated version comes out.
Yeah. So that's true. In which case, I'm gonna have a lot of problems on my hands. No. I mean, my mom has a copy of my book, and I talk to her about the poems in it. But I do think in some ways it's easier that I can sort of like interpret for her as opposed to like she would read the book and be like, damn, my son was so sad. Be like, no, it's okay, Mom, you did great. I love you so much. It's good. Yeah, I don't know, how do y'all feel?
I'm from a like fairly conservative, very traditional Sudanese Muslim family. So my hope is that they're not reading my poems, but you know, I try not to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, and there are family members I don't talk to because of the poems, you know, and it's probably for the better. Like I wasn't really fucking with them too tough anyway. But there's two. One is because of the politics in the poems that made me kind of, you know, like ostracized from my family in some ways, which is cool. And then the other is that sometimes it's like, because I write about family stuff, that somebody will not remember it as I remembered it, or they won't want me to share my like emotional truth of that moment, and that will be a point of tension. And I think it's taken both my parents and my brother some time to understand what it's taken books for them to understand what I'm trying to do. And now, for the most part, they're cool with it. But like, my last book, my mom will not give to my grandma, because there's a piece in there about her husband that I think everybody is pretty sure we just don't want them to read, you know?
I'm thinking about politics and how politics seems to, or how hip hop interplays with politics and how it motivates or is like intersecting with a lot of your work. And I'm also thinking about what you said about joy. That meant a lot. That felt really powerful to me. And I'm wondering how all that fits together with these ideas about resilience and community and moving forward in a very, very ugly world that you write about and clearly are feeling, but also are trying to find redemption and resilience in that. So any more words about that would be lovely.
I mean, a few things. One, I think we have to remember that hip hop was created to contest the dominant narrative, was created by young people who were forgotten about by the city of New York and America itself, literally in the rubbles of the South Bronx through a party. And I think it's that same spirit that carries through the culture, that despite, the maintenance and legacy of white supremacy, despite the constant dehumanization and militarism against the Black and brown body, there's still, people still find the will to celebrate. An example of this is that one of our friends who's in the book, Malcolm London, who's one of the younger BreakBeat poets, is also a organizer of the Black Youth Project in Chicago and does a lot of work. This weekend, they just shut down the intersection of a major police gathering, and they took to the streets and had an incredible action. And he throws a monthly party called Unapologetic, and it is absolutely a turn up. It is at a club on the near south side of Chicago. The music that's being played is, everything that you might find in a typical club. Like, the music that's coming through the speakers is not necessarily the most progressive, and people find themselves in that space on a Wednesday, turning up and celebrating one another, and then going back to do the work. And I think you need that constant regeneration amongst your trusted community in order to go and battle every day. I talk a lot about like the necessity of being in that familial space when we are here, when we're at home, because the whole world is the site to do battle.
I think what I've found a lot in the cultures that I feel I belong to, hip hop being one of them, is that we celebrate as fiercely as we mourn in equal parts and sometimes at the same time, where even at funerals, for example, in Sudan, people will like dress in white and bring a lot of food and like sit and hang out. So it won't be as necessarily as loud as a turn up, but there's like a quiet sort of celebration there. And I think it's important. I think like you need to celebrate just as much, if not more, than you mourn. Otherwise, no one's gonna make it through if you're not balancing all the sad shit with like a little bit of joy.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I felt bad sometimes about moments when I was like, I'd be like, how dare I feel good? There's so much terrible shit happening every moment of every day. And now I really relish the moments where I feel good, because for all the reasons that they've said, right? Like, the terrible shit that is happening is constant. It never ends, and it feels like because of that, it becomes even more important to love one another. Speaking of the Black Youth Project, they have this rallying cry that is really powerful to me that comes from Assata Shakur, which is something like, it is our duty to win, it is our duty to love each other. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but like the fact that it is our duty to love each other, isn't it, is really powerful and resonates with me, right? Like, I don't think that anything happens individually. I think the only way that we win is through community, is through really loving each other and holding each other up and making sure that we're okay and that we're like making it through. So it makes absolute sense to me to like party and to hang out and to dance and to like take those moments for ourselves, because the world is like so often trying to steal moments from us, trying to steal, you know, years from us.
Yeah. You guys got any questions?
Comments, concerns?
Anyone would like to see Kevin battle rap?
I definitely want to hear more poems.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask one more question and then maybe.
Yeah, we'll end with, yeah, we'll end with.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So we only have, you know, 3 of you here, and yet we see such a wide diversity in terms of what is poetry, what is hip hop, what are you writing about, right? And so in terms of kind of thinking about how hip hop kind of speaks to or represents maybe a kind of an idea of diversity, like a sameness that brings you all together, but then also a diversity amongst those who are part of that family, part of that tradition. That's not really a question, that's kind of a question.
Yeah. No, that's right. You know, hip hop stays gifting the world everything, and one of the things that it does, it sets up, I think, the egalitarian model for democratic organization in the cipher. And in the cipher, you know, and KRS-One says, that's why we build it in a cipher. You hear me, kid, the government is building in a pyramid. The cipher you have, you are one voice of the many. And as long as your contribution is in the spirit of the cipher, then you're good and you can hang and stay and participate. Once you begin to, like, you know, commit fuckery against the cipher, you'll probably get punched in the face, which I also think is a good thing. And so in that regard, like the you know, that family unit or that structure of, you know, you might be different and you're standing next to me, and that's cool because you're contributing to something that is greater than just me as well. And my presence here is then implied in that social contract that what we're really trying to do is make the cipher work. You know? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
A model for what America tried to strove to be, like an idea, right? That, you know, left and right and center and whatever were.
Just put some hip hop on it, it'll work.
Yeah, I mean,
I missed that.
put some hip hop on it, it'll work. And and I think that that's real. I think that actually hip hop is the democratic experiment gone more right. It has a lot further to go. I mean, you know, when we listen to even music that is not on the radio, but that is being produced and that we consume, it's still filled with shit that I think all of us want to push our culture to be better about. And at the same time, I think it's the most viable form to have this kind of radical critical conversation with the people involved, because they are in the room, in the cipher. And I think we do that work a lot. So it really is that democratic experiment manifest, you know?
Beautiful. Should we have some poetry?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to end on one poem each. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not going to read the long diatribe battle rap against America as I initially did. I'm going to do something else.
Better luck tomorrow, guys.
Yeah. I'm going to read a kind. I guess I'm going to read a kind of love poem as well to close. You guys inspired me to do that. Slash goaded me. Slash like talk shit. And now thank you guys. Oh, and this also brings me to a question. Can you guys point us to where the graffiti is in Bangor, Maine? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk please afterwards? I'm real, and I know it's in every city. When I was just in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and I'm like, and people were showing me like, yo, there's nothing in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I'm like, I guarantee you I will find it. And I found it. It was one piece, but it was dope. It was like dope double letters. It was crazy. And I was so happy to have taken the photo for Instagram at Kevin Coval on Instagram. Crazy. All right, so I really love graffiti. I've been a fan of it for a very long time. In the last bunch of years, I've gotten more serious about it. The guy who coined the phrase, the Breakbeat Poets, is a poet and playwright named Idris Goodwin. And we were on the phone talking about the experiment, the project, what we do as hip hop generation writers. And he's like, oh, word. He's like, yeah, we're the Breakbeat Poets. And I was like, we say that again, my dude? You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, we're the Breakbeat Poets. I'm like, that's crazy. And he and I write together a lot. We wrote a play about graffiti called This Is Modern Art. And this is like it's just a poem. It's called The City is a Gallery. I want to go to Galleria F to see what street art is brought inside and stare at the sunset throwing red light off the wall as the blue line roars above Milwaukee Avenue. One day, I'll ask him for a drink at the Whistler or somewhere we've not been. He has a mixed kid. I think we might. I want to see Krista's Library of Love. I missed the opening because there was too much that night. A show. I want to go there with you, out a car or off the green line and see Miguel's mural spray paint, not bullets, and light gleam off 100 broken liquor bottles in an empty lot to the east like a disco ball, a Great Lake shimmer. I want to walk with you on bridges, near trains, under overpasses, CCMK, MUL, CST, FTR, D30, DC5, ABC, Amuse, and Venom, and anyone up and fresh. I want to hunt Oryx paintings screwed on boarded up storefronts like gold, peep all of Rubens' wild plumage, commissioned and unsanctioned, a peacock, flock with you south and all over the city. Maybe grab a sandwich before, a drink after, go to Little Village for a coffee and tamale, hit the old tracks where the Meeting the Styles goes down over the summer and barbecue and drink all day and talk to the writers and their families. This is to say nothing of the curve of beach at North Avenue where the old men play chess in straw hats with brown bags of beer, or the planetarium to see the sky wild style morning again. This is to say nothing of the million festivals or museums or marches I want to walk slow with you in. This is to say the city is a changing exhibition, and I am down to see it and hold your hand for a while or forever, like you know I want to.
Sure. Right. All right. So because this is an American Studies course, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna read my poem about citizenship. Yeah. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. It's at JOSE, but it's complicated. I should get a new Twitter name.
It's the letters but spelled out.
Yeah.
Like JAYOH.
ESSE.
It'd be awesome if right now on the recording, it was right under your.
Yeah. Shout out to the video editor. I appreciate you.
And then they do a selfie back with the camera and then it's back.
This is called Citizen Illegal. Take a Mexican woman and a Mexican man. If they have a baby in Mexico, then the baby is Mexican. If the baby is born in America, we have to start over. Mexican woman illegal and Mexican man illegal have a Mexican illegal American citizen, or technically an American citizen. Is the baby more Mexican or American? Place the baby in the arms of the mother, illegal. If the mother holds the baby, citizen too long, does the baby become illegal? The baby is a boy. Years later, the boy goes to school. His classmates are Americans, citizens. He is outcast, illegal. His hellos are in the wrong language, illegal. He takes the hyphen separating loneliness, Mexican, from friendship, American, and jabs it at the culprit, illegal, himself, illegal, his own traitorous tongue, illegal, his name, illegal, his mom, illegal, his dad, illegal. Take a Mexican woman, illegal, and a Mexican man, illegal. If they have a baby and the baby looks white, citizen enough to pass, citizen. But the baby grows up singing Selena, illegal, songs to his reflection, illegal, and hiding from El Cucuy, illegal, and La Migra, citizen. If the baby, illegal citizen, grows up to speak broken Spanish, illegal, and perfect English, citizen. If the boy's illegal nickname is Güerito, citizen. If the boy attends college, citizen. If the boy, citizen, only dates women, illegal, of color, illegal. If the boy, illegal, uses phrases like women of color, citizen. If the boy, illegal citizen, writes illegal poems, illegal. If the boy, citizen, illegal, grows up illegal and can only write illegal, this story in English, citizen, does that make him citizen, more American, citizen, or Mexican, illegal?
So I have to ask, did you start with some inspiration from Public Enemy?
For this poem? No.
No.
But always.
Yeah.
So fun fact, I have a friend whose rap name is illegal, but spelled L-eagle.
Oh, fresh, yeah.
This poem has nothing to do with that. My favorite scenario to imagine and write about is my parents, like when they first met, they were young and hot and in love, and Sudan was like the place to be. And I always like to imagine them at a party, which is often why my mom doesn't read these poems, because she's like, like a little hijabi Muslim woman who's, very serious in her job. So, but I like to imagine that moment. So this poem is called A Brief History of Silence, or The Last Time Marvin Gaye Was Heard in the Sudan. 1. At the Musicians Club in Omdurman, a singer is stabbed to death for playing secular music. The month before, a violinist on his way home is beaten by police, his instrument smashed to matchwood. All the bars in Khartoum are closed down. All the alcohol in Khartoum poured into the Nile. A new law forbids women from dancing in the presence of men, and another bans song lyrics that mention women's bodies. 2. At a party in Omdurman, lights strung among the date palms, my not yet mother, honey legs in a skirt, opens her mouth and the night air is the gap in her teeth. She sings in a lilting English to a slow song, while bodies around her pair off and press close. Before he is my father smokes a cigarette and shows all his teeth when he laughs. Wants to ask the dark gold girl how her English got so good, what the words mean, and could he sing something sometime into the gap in her teeth. But first, police arrive, rip lanterns from trees, and fire a shot through the final notes of the song. And tonight, my parents do not meet. 3. I imagine Khartoum as it was in the 80s. My mother with ribbons in her hair, dress spanning about her nutmeg calves. My father, who I hear was so lively and handsome that only bad magic could have emptied that and filled him with smoke. The borrowed record player, the generation that would leave to make nostalgia of these nights, to hyphenate their children and grow gnarled by diasporas every winter. But tonight, Motown crackling into the hot twilight, mosquitoes swaying in the velvet dusk. My parents dance without ever touching.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys having us on campus. Thanks for rocking with us in the workshop today. Those who were in it crushed. We learned a lot from the workshop, including the new word. What's the new word?
Alexithymia.
Alexithymia. You feel me?
Feel me?
Wicked.
Lexidamia.
But a cucumber is not a vegetable, it's a fruit.
Right, we learned a lot here today.
Yeah. The world is crashing down around me.
You guys, please, stay in touch. Like, we'll, at some point, we're in Maine the next few days, but we'll probably be back at some point too.
BreakBeat Poets has a Twitter. You can
Yeah.
follow it.
At BreakBeat Poets on Twitter.
Executive
And we all are people in the world, so holler at us. But tonight, please, get a book. We'll give discounts to students. So Daniel can sell you a book, take credit cards and cash. And don't forget to have all the broccoli and some sandwiches, some chips. And for real, thank you guys for having us. Really appreciate it.
I'm not kidding either, you have to eat broccoli.
Yeah. And buy books.
And buy books. Well, great. Yeah, thanks so much, you guys, for coming, and again, please feel free to, we also have some Sharpies over there, so feel free to sign as well.
Yeah, man, let's do this. You guys need Sharpies? I got Sharpies.